In the ruins of the Second World War, the world lay in pieces. Empires that ruled for centuries had vanished into dust. Cities were rubble. Economies were drained dry. But from that destruction, something new began to rise. A form of power that didn't march with armies, didn't fly a flag, didn't fire a single shot. It wasn't a nation that conquered. It was money that took the stage. The battlefield of the modern age, not land, but liquidity. In 1944, at Bretton Woods, 44 nations came together, determined to rebuild a world torn apart. Their goal, to stop another depression or war from ever happening again. Pretty wild, right? The solution was elegant and revolutionary. The US dollar would be backed by gold. Every other currency would be pegged to the dollar. Gold became the anchor. The dollar became the chain, and the world was bound to it. With 3/4 of the planet's gold and an untouched industrial base, America didn't conquer economies. It purchased them, one currency peg at a time. For an entire generation, the global financial system seemed invincible, a towering edifice of stability and promise. Trade surged across continents, weaving nations together in a complex web of commerce, industry, and investment. Factories hummed, ports overflowed with goods, and cities expanded as prosperity spread to millions. Economic growth felt boundless, as if the world had finally learned the lessons of past depressions and wars. Yet beneath this gleaming surface, cracks were forming, imbalances, debts, and overextensions that few noticed, threatening to turn the apparent strength into a fragile illusion. But beneath the surface, the math was collapsing. America printed more dollars than it had gold to back. Wars demanded enormous sums of money to fuel armies, build weapons, and sustain global campaigns. Simultaneously, economic growth across nations required ever-increasing liquidity to finance factories, infrastructure, and international trade. To meet these twin pressures, governments printed vast quantities of currency, creating a flood of paper promises. But soon, the balance between promise and reality began to crumble. There was far more paper circulating than gold or tangible value to back it. What had once been a stable, trust-based system now teetered on the edge of illusion, where faith in money became more critical than the metal that had once guaranteed it in 1971. France demanded its gold and exposed the truth. Nixon had a choice: lose America's gold or break the system. He chose the system. The gold window closed. Money became unbacked, untethered. A political promise sustained only by trust. But trust alone couldn't sustain an empire. America turned to the world's lifeblood, oil. A secret pact with Saudi Arabia made every barrel of oil priced exclusively in dollars. In return, America offered protection. From that exchange, the petrodollar was born. Oil demand meant dollar demand. Dollar demand meant global dependence. Gold was gone. Black gold replaced it. Then came the most powerful weapon of all. Dead dollar loans shaped the futures of nations. When countries struggled to repay, the IMF and World Bank arrived with conditions: cut spending, privatize, obey the rules. It wasn't conquest, it was compliance. Nations restructured, economies rewired. The new empire didn't deploy armies. It deployed terms. In the East, a different story was unfolding. Japan, Korea, China. Factories buzzing, exports soaring, dollar reserves growing. Asia produced, America consumed. But in 1997, the balance broke. The Asian financial crisis swept through markets. Currencies collapsed. Economies stumbled, and the IMF stepped in again. Asia rebuilt, but never forgot. The seeds of a multipolar world were quietly planted. By the new millennium, America commanded power without occupation. Central banks held U.S. treasuries. Corporations priced goods in dollars. And any nation cut off from the system faced economic darkness. The world had become dependent on an invisible empire, one maintained not by force, but by financial architecture. Then came 2008, the empire's near-fatal wound. Banks drowned. Markets froze. Trust evaporated. To save the system, central banks printed trillions. Money created not from production, but from code. It worked. But at a cost. Markets revived while inequality exploded. Money stopped reflecting value. It became a mechanism engineered to preserve the system itself. New challengers are stepping up. China's throwing cash around in yuan. Russia's pushing energy in rubles. And Europe's really thinking hard about its reliance on these players. It's a whole new game, right? For the first time in 75 years, the dollar faced rivals. The conflict of the 21st century wasn't ideological. It was transactional. Who controls settlement, controls power. Sanctions became weapons. Payment networks became battlefields. These days, economics is totally tied to geopolitics. Debt, liquidity, and energy are like the missiles and shields nations use to protect themselves and make moves. It's wild how intertwined everything is, right? When governments resist, sanctions strike. When markets panic, leaders fall, and inflation becomes the silent tax paid by billions. Money is the battlefield, right? And controlling it shapes our future. In both systems, the weight just kept pushing down, making it tough for everyone. Take the US dollar, for example. The government can just print more money, which can lead to inflation. This means that while they can stimulate the economy, it can also make things more expensive for us in the long run. It's like giving a kid a candy jar and saying, go for it. It sounds fun until they eat way too much and get a stomachache. So, while fiat money gives governments flexibility, it definitely comes with its own set of risks and consequences. What do you think about this whole system? In both systems, the weight just kept pushing down, making it tough for everyone. Each financial crisis reshapes the global balance of power, redrawing invisible borders that govern influence, control, and wealth. Nations rise or fall not always through war, but through debt, trade, and economic pressure. The consequences ripple across continents. Alliances shift, industries collapse, currencies crumble, and ordinary people bear the weight of decisions made in boardrooms and central banks. History shows that these shifts are rarely isolated. Each crisis sets the stage for the next, creating patterns of vulnerability and opportunity. And when the next upheaval arrives, it will be no different. The world's power map will once again be rewritten. Silently, but irrevocably. The world is no longer defined by the borders of nations or the waving of flags. Today, influence is measured in numbers, debt, and digital ledgers, in the cold, unyielding language of balance sheets. Some countries wield power not through armies or alliances, but by the simple act of printing money, shaping global markets, and controlling the flow of capital. Economies, industries, and even governments bend to the invisible force of financial dominance. In this modern era, the ability to create liquidity, manipulate credit, and command trust is the ultimate form of authority. And those who master it hold the reins of global power. While some nations wield power by creating money, others are forced to borrow it, entering a cycle of dependence that shapes their economies and politics. This imbalance ripples far beyond governments and banks. Billions of ordinary people feel the weight of these decisions in their daily lives. Prices rise, eroding savings and wages. Essential services are cut back under austerity measures, and national sovereignty is subtly surrendered to satisfy creditors and maintain access to global markets. The invisible hand of finance dictates who thrives and who struggles, turning abstract numbers on a balance sheet into real human suffering. In this modern economic battlefield, the consequences of debt are measured not in ledgers, but in lives reshaped by circumstance and constraint. These are the wars of our era, fought not on battlefields with bombs or bullets, but through the invisible weapons of finance and currency. Nations clash in boardrooms, trading floors, and digital networks, leveraging debt, sanctions, and monetary policy to exert control over rivals. Trade routes, energy markets, and global supply chains become arenas of conflict, where a single decision can destabilize economies, topple governments, and reshape alliances. Ordinary citizens bear the brunt of these silent battles, feeling the effects through inflation, unemployment, and diminished opportunity. In this age, power is no longer defined by armies or territory, but by the ability to manipulate money, influence markets, and dictate the rules of the global economic game. The answers to our financial future aren't hidden in tomorrow. They are rewritten in the past. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Each crisis, each bailout, each promise of stability reveals the same truth. When control over money becomes control over people, economics becomes power. Because in the end, it was never just about wealth. It was about who gets to define it.